here with all of you is truly a wonderful experience. Today, I have something to share that will completely transform the way you see life. Imagine for a moment a man and a woman standing at the altar, hands trembling, eyes filled with love, whispering sacred vows to one another. In that moment, they are not merely making a promise to each other, they are entering into something far greater, a divine covenant, a reflection of God's love for His people. Marriage was never meant to be just a contract, something written on paper. It was designed as a sacred, unbreakable bond, one that carries the weight of heaven itself. But what happens when that bond is shattered? What happens when the love that once burned so brightly fades into sorrow? Some would say that divorce is an unforgivable failure, a mark of disobedience that cannot be undone. But is that truly the heart of God? Or is there something deeper, something more profound in the way He sees us? My dear friends, we do not live in a world of perfection. We live in a world of brokenness. A world where hearts are wounded, trust is betrayed, and sometimes, despite our best intentions, marriages fall apart. But let me ask you, does God abandon the broken-hearted, or does He step closer to them, offering grace where the world offers judgment? Some say that divorce is always a sin, that remarriage is forbidden, but let us look not just at the words of Scripture, but at the heart behind them. When Jesus spoke of marriage, He spoke of its sacredness, He upheld its beauty, yet He also revealed God's mercy. Yes, divorce grieves God's heart, not because He is angry, but because He knows the pain it brings to His children. But when Scripture speaks of grace, of redemption, of a God who makes all things new, does that not include the lives of those who have suffered loss? There are those among us who have walked through the valley of divorce, who have cried out in the night, wondering if they are condemned forever. But listen closely. Our God is not the God of eternal condemnation. He is the God of restoration. He is the one who lifts up the weary, who binds the wounds of the broken, who calls them beloved. And what of remarriage? Some would say it is an act of defiance. But I ask, if God can restore the lost, heal the wounded, and redeem the past, can He not also bless a new beginning? If love is born in truth, if it is nurtured in faith, and if it seeks to honor Him, can it not also be a testimony of His mercy? You see, dear ones, life is not a perfect story. It is a journey filled with pain and redemption, with failure and grace. If you have known the pain of divorce, do not believe for a moment that you are cast aside. If you are seeking love again, do not let shame be your prison. God does not measure your worth by your past, but by His love for you, and that love is endless, unshakable, eternal. So, I ask you, what do you believe? Do you believe in a God who leaves the broken in their sorrow, or do you believe in a God who picks them up, dusts them off, and whispers, "You are still mine"? Marriage is not merely a human contract or a social arrangement. It is a sacred bond woven into the very fabric of creation. From the beginning, it was not an institution crafted by human hands, but a divine design meant to reflect something far greater than itself. When two souls come together in the covenant of marriage, they are not merely partners in life, but co-heirs of a holy purpose, bearers of a love that mirrors the divine. It is a union that does not rest on fleeting emotions or fragile circumstances, but on a foundation meant to withstand the storms of life. At its core, marriage is not about convenience or personal fulfillment alone. It is about sacrifice, about learning to love beyond oneself. It is about finding strength in unity, walking hand in hand through the trials and triumphs of life. In its purest form, it is a reflection of God's unwavering love. A love that does not abandon, does not falter, and does not wither with time. It is not a contract to be torn apart at the first sign of struggle, but a covenant meant to be upheld through grace, patience, and unwavering commitment. But in a world where self-interest often takes precedence over sacrifice, the meaning of marriage has been clouded. Many enter it with expectations of perpetual happiness, forgetting that love is not a mere feeling but a discipline, a daily choice. Love is not tested in the moments of ease, but in the moments of difficulty. When challenges arise, when hearts are burdened, and when differences seem insurmountable, that is when the true nature of love is revealed. Marriage was designed to teach selflessness, to shape souls into something holier than they were before. It is within the trials of marriage that patience is forged, humility is nurtured, and grace is learned. There will be days of joy, but there will also be days of sorrow. There will be times when forgiveness is the only bridge that remains, and times when sacrifice will be the only way forward. Yet, in those moments, something beautiful is cultivated, something deeper than fleeting passion or momentary happiness. It is a love that endures. Yet, even with this divine design, marriage is not a prison. It is not meant to be a place of unrelenting pain or suffering. It is not meant to bind a person to destruction or despair. It was never God's intent that one should remain shackled to a covenant that has been utterly broken, where harm is inflicted rather than love cultivated. For just as marriage is a sacred bond, so too is the heart of the one who enters it. It is not God's desire for anyone to be trapped in a place where love has turned to ashes and where dignity has been stripped away. This understanding does not diminish the sanctity of marriage, rather, it elevates it. It reminds us that marriage was never meant to be taken lightly, that it was never meant to be discarded without cause. But it also reminds us that love, in its truest form, does not destroy, it restores. It does not bind a soul in misery, it uplifts. It does not seek to keep someone caged in suffering, it seeks to bring healing. Understanding marriage through God's design requires wisdom, patience, and an openness to grace. It is not a rigid set of rules meant to trap, but a sacred journey meant to refine. It is not about perfection, but perseverance. It is about seeking not just personal happiness, but a deeper, more enduring joy. The kind that only comes when love is built upon something greater than itself. When brokenness is a reality that touches every human soul at some point in life. It is the weight of sorrow that settles in the heart, the ache of disappointment that lingers long after hope has faded. It is the quiet realization that things are not as they were meant to be, that the picture of life we once imagined has been shattered into pieces too scattered to gather. No one is immune to brokenness. It does not discriminate, nor does it ask for permission before it enters a life. It comes through loss, through betrayal, through the pain of dreams unfulfilled and expectations left unanswered. It comes through the struggles of relationships, the wounds of abandonment, and the deep fractures that form when love turns to silence. Yet brokenness is not just something that happens to us, it is something that exists within us. Humanity, at its core, carries a weight of imperfection. There are moments when selfishness overcomes kindness, when pride replaces humility, when anger takes the place of patience. There are times when we hurt the very people we love, when we fail to live up to the standards we set for ourselves, and in those moments, we come face to face with the truth we often try to ignore, that we are not whole, that we are in need of something greater than ourselves to heal what has been fractured within. But brokenness, for all its weight, is not the end of the story. In fact, it is often the beginning of something far greater. It is in the cracks of a shattered life that light is able to enter. It is in the moments of deepest sorrow that the soul is most open to transformation. It is in the awareness of our own insufficiency that we come to understand our need for grace. When we face our brokenness, when we stop pretending that we have everything together, we create space for healing to begin. There is a temptation to hide brokenness, to cover it with the appearance of strength, to pretend that the wounds do not exist. But healing does not come through denial. It comes through the courage to acknowledge what is real. It comes through honesty, through the willingness to bring our burdens into the light instead of burying them beneath the surface. It comes through the understanding that brokenness is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be redeemed. Every crack in the human heart tells a story. Some are stories of loss, others of betrayal, others of struggles fought in silence. But no matter how deep the wound, no matter how great the pain, there is always hope. For brokenness is not a sign of defeat, it is an invitation to something greater. It is a call to let go of what is no longer meant to be held, to surrender the weight of sorrow in exchange for something new. It is a reminder that even in the midst of pain, something beautiful can still be created. There is no life too shattered to be restored, no heart too wounded to be made whole. The very things that break us are often the things that lead us to our greatest transformation, for it is in brokenness that strength is born. It is in brokenness that compassion grows. It is in brokenness that we are shaped into something more resilient, more understanding, more capable of love than we were before. The reality of brokenness is not a reality of despair. It is a reality of redemption. It is the recognition that even when all seems lost, grace still remains. Divorce is one of the most painful and complex experiences a person can go through. It is not merely the dissolution of a legal contract, but the unraveling of two lives once woven together. It carries emotional, spiritual, and even physical weight, leaving wounds that take time to heal. In the midst of such sorrow, people often turn to their faith for guidance, seeking to understand what God says about the breaking of a covenant that was meant to last a lifetime. The biblical perspective on divorce is not merely a set of rules or restrictions. It is a reflection of God's heart for humanity, His deep desire for love, commitment, and redemption, even in the midst of brokenness. From the beginning, marriage was designed as a sacred bond. The book of Genesis speaks of a man leaving his father and mother to be joined to his wife, and the two becoming one flesh. This oneness is more than a physical union. It is emotional, spiritual, and lifelong in its intent. Marriage was never meant to be a temporary arrangement, something discarded when challenges arise. It was established as a reflection of God's unwavering love, a covenant, not merely a contract. A contract can be voided when one party fails, but a covenant, in God's design, is a binding promise that endures. Yet, as history has shown, humanity struggles to live up to the ideal. The human heart, prone to selfishness and frailty, often falls short of the love and faithfulness marriage requires. The Bible does not ignore this reality. It acknowledges that hearts grow hard, that love can be broken, and that sometimes, despite every effort, reconciliation does not happen. Jesus himself addressed the issue, explaining that divorce was permitted in the law of Moses not because it was God's desire, but because of the hardness of human hearts. It was a concession to the brokenness of the world, not an endorsement of separation. Throughout Scripture, there is a consistent theme. God's priority is always reconciliation, healing, and restoration. The prophets repeatedly use marriage as a metaphor for God's relationship with His people. Even when Israel was unfaithful, God pursued them with relentless love. This does not mean that every marriage can or should be saved. There are situations of abuse, abandonment, and deep betrayal that make continued union impossible, but it does mean that God's first desire is always healing before dissolution. For those who have walked the road of divorce, there can be feelings of guilt, failure, and deep sorrow. It can feel as though a sacred promise has been broken beyond repair. But even in the midst of this pain, Scripture speaks of hope. God is a God of new beginnings, of mercy that is renewed every morning. He does not abandon those who have suffered loss, nor does he condemn those who have experienced the deep grief of divorce. Instead, he offers comfort, restoration, and the promise that brokenness is not the end of the story. There are many who wonder if remarriage is permissible after divorce, and the Bible's teachings on this subject are complex. Some passages seem to speak against it, while others acknowledge circumstances where remarriage may be a part of God's redemptive plan. What is clear throughout Scripture is that God values love, commitment, and integrity in relationships. The focus is not merely on whether remarriage is allowed, but on whether hearts are seeking to honor God in every step forward. In the end, divorce is not just about legal matters or theological debates. It is about people, hearts that are hurting, lives that are being reshaped, and futures that are uncertain. It is about finding grace in the midst of pain, seeking wisdom in the midst of confusion, and trusting that God's plan for each person's life is not derailed by one chapter of hardship. Whether one remains single, reconciles with a former spouse, or finds love again, the most important truth remains: God's love never wavers. His grace is sufficient, and His ability to restore is beyond what the human heart can fathom. Redemption is at the heart of everything God does. From the moment humanity fell, He has been in the business of restoring what was broken, healing what was wounded, and breathing new life into places that once seemed beyond hope. Nowhere is this truth more deeply felt than in the lives of those who have walked through the painful valley of divorce. The end of a marriage can feel like the end of a dream, a failure, too heavy to bear, a road too broken to rebuild. And yet, in God's great mercy, He does not leave His children in the ruins of what was lost. He is the God of redemption, and even in the matter of remarriage, His grace shines brighter than human weakness. There are those who wrestle with guilt, fearing that stepping into love again means they have turned away from God's will. Others carry the weight of shame, wondering if they are forever disqualified from the joy of companionship. The whispers of condemnation creep in, suggesting that what has been broken can never be made whole. But God does not see through the lens of human failure. He sees through the lens of His mercy. His story has always been one of giving beauty for ashes, of turning mourning into joy. To understand remarriage through His eyes is to understand that His plan is never one of punishment, but of renewal. Marriage is sacred, a covenant designed to mirror God's faithfulness. But He also knows the frailty of human hearts. He knows that sin, betrayal, and brokenness have woven themselves into the fabric of the world, making some unions impossible to mend. Jesus Himself acknowledged that divorce was permitted, not because it was God's desire, but because of the hardness of hearts. If God, in His wisdom, allowed for the reality of divorce, then surely He also makes a way for healing, restoration, and even a new beginning. To those who have found themselves in the place where love was lost, where a vow was broken, and where pain replaced joy, know this: God has not abandoned you. He does not see you as damaged or unworthy of love. His grace is bigger than your past. His mercy is greater than your mistakes, and His plans for you are not limited by what has been lost. If He, the Creator of all things, can make the sun rise after the darkest night, how much more can He breathe new life into a heart that thought love was no longer possible? Remarriage, when entered into with wisdom, prayer and a heart that seeks to honor God can be a reflection of His redemptive nature. It is not about replacing what was lost, nor is it about erasing the past. Rather, it is about stepping into the future with faith, knowing that God is a God of second chances. The question is not whether remarriage is allowed, but whether it is pursued with a heart that is surrendered to God's will. In Him, love is not bound by human failures, and new beginnings are not out of reach. For those who are walking this road, whether hesitantly or with renewed hope, know that redemption is not just a concept, it is God's promise. He does not leave His children in the wilderness, He leads them to the land of new life. Whatever your story has been, whatever heartache you have carried, His grace is sufficient. He restores, He redeems, and He makes all things new. Love and forgiveness are among the most powerful forces in existence. They are the very essence of what it means to live a life that reflects the divine, to walk in the footsteps of the one who created us, and to rise above the limitations of human frailty. Love has the power to transform, to heal wounds so deep they seem unhealable, to soften hearts that have been hardened by pain, and to restore what once seemed broken beyond repair. Forgiveness, equally profound, is the key that unlocks the chains of bitterness, setting both the giver and receiver free. Together, they form the foundation of true peace, true joy, and true strength. To love is to reflect the nature of God Himself, for He is love. It is easy to love when love is given in return, when relationships are smooth and untested by hardship. But the true power of love is revealed in how it endures, even when challenged, even when met with rejection, even when pain enters the story. Love that mirrors the divine does not wither when trials arise. Instead, it grows deeper, stronger, and more resilient. It reaches beyond self-interest and extends grace where grace is undeserved. This is the love that has the power to change the world, not through force, not through demand, but through its quiet, unwavering presence. But love alone is not enough if it does not carry the heartbeat of forgiveness. Without forgiveness, love is hindered by resentment, weighed down by the past, unable to fully flourish. Forgiveness is not the denial of pain, nor is it an excuse for wrongdoing. It does not mean that hurt was insignificant or that wounds should be ignored. Rather, it is the courageous act of releasing the burden of anger and choosing not to let the actions of others determine the condition of one's own heart. Forgiveness is a gift, not only to the one who is forgiven, but to the one who forgives. It is an act of trust, trust that justice belongs to God, trust that bitterness will not bring healing, and trust that freedom is found in letting go. The power of love and forgiveness is most evident in the moments where they seem impossible. When one is betrayed, when words wound, when relationships are fractured, the human heart often cries out for justice, for fairness, for repayment. Yet love and forgiveness call us to something higher. They call us to respond with kindness when harshness is expected, to extend mercy where condemnation feels justified, to choose reconciliation where division seems inevitable. This is not weakness. It is the greatest strength. To love when it is difficult, to forgive when it is undeserved, is to step into the very nature of divine grace. And there is no greater example of this than the ultimate act of love and forgiveness displayed on the cross. It was there that love conquered hate, where mercy triumphed over judgment, where forgiveness was extended to those who had not even asked for it. This is the love that transforms, the forgiveness that sets captives free. And if such love was given to humanity freely and undeservedly, how much more should it flow from those who have received it? To love and forgive is not to be blind to injustice, nor is it to allow oneself to be mistreated. Rather, it is to choose a higher way, to refuse to be defined by hurt, and to walk in the freedom that comes from releasing the past. It is to trust that healing is possible, that restoration is real, and that the future is not bound by what has been. The power of love and forgiveness is not just in what it does for others, it is in what it does within. It softens the hardened heart, brings peace to the restless soul, and allows light to enter even the darkest places. Love and forgiveness, when embraced fully, do not merely change situations, they change lives.